question on my video blog reminds me of an old saying that smart men go broke three ways: liquor, ladies, and leverage. The question is that why should I buy a house? Now that's a very interesting question. So far we have been addressing the question whether this is the right time to buy a house. But this argument that why should I buy a house has its own merit. It questions a product that is illiquid, overvalued, and overloaded should be avoided. If not, give me your reasons. Well, first of all, I must say that's a very smart question in today's housing market. Housing is a negative investment in this part of the world. There are two reasons why we enter the housing market. One is your financial reasons, other is your social and emotional urge. Looking purely from the financial standpoint, a house does not make sense in a market where your capital cost and rental yield are at the two extreme poles. There is a huge mismatch between capital cost, your overall acquisition cost, and your borrowing cost. Of course, there are social and emotional urge that drives the housing market. That has always been the case, barring a phase when the house was appreciating year on year at the rate of 15 to 20%. That was the time when housing could have been declared as an asset class. Today, a house by any standard definition of an asset class does not hold true. An asset class by definition is something that gives you yields, that is appreciating class. Real estate is neither giving, whether you are buying it for self-use or for rental yields, it is neither giving you positive yields nor it is appreciating over medium to long term. I have another question here. Do you borrow to buy any other investment instrument? Do you borrow to buy a mutual fund or stock? Why then do you borrow to buy a house other than your social and emotional urge? A borrowed money has absolutely no place in the investment basket. I think world over real estate is the only exception where you borrow money to buy an asset class, which more often than not is a promise when you go and buy it, and you never know it will turn into a performance in which shape, what kind of product will be given to you. Now the question is whether you should buy a house and who should buy a house. If the broad recommendation is that one should avoid buying a house in today's overheated market where there is no appreciation, then who should buy a house? Well, before coming to who should buy a house, I would give my reasons why we normally advise to be careful in buying a house. First of all, a house is an illiquid asset class. Secondly, it is an underperforming asset class. Thirdly, you tend to make mistake in buying a house because this is an emotionally charged product. You are more emotional than rational in buying a house. Then there is no value addition in terms of yields. Last but not the least, we outgrow homes. By the time you buy a house, your needs, aspirations are something different, and in the next 3, 4 or 5 years, by the time you get the possession of an apartment, your needs change, your aspirations change, your circumstances change. It's much better to live in a rental house in a country where the rental yields are in the range of 1.5% to 2.3%, as against the buying acquisition cost where you borrow 7 plus percent, rental yields stand around 1 or 2%. Even if you factor in the tax benefits that you get, it still stands as a negative investment. Coming back to who should buy a house, our broad recommendation is that if you are in your 20s, howsoever well earning you may be, don't buy a house. It could be more of a liability than asset. It could chain you in your professional growth tomorrow if you get a good opportunity in some other city. It could curtail your other necessary social spending. By the time you reach 30s, you have some stability. You have a family and family is growing, so you need a house, and there is a level of social and emotional urge at this point of time. At this stage, unless you have a good saving where you can give 40 to 50% upfront payment from your own savings, don't buy a house. Don't think of borrowing more than 50%. By the time you are in your 40s, you tend to settle a bit. You know which is the city where you are going to spend the rest of your life. More or less, you are also at a stage when you start planning for your retirement and you need a place to settle permanently. At this stage, unless and until you have inherited wealth or earned wealth and you are in a position to upfront pay 60-70% from your own investment, don't buy a house. In your 40s, buying a house with more than 30% of the borrowed capital is going to be a huge drain and can hamper your retirement plans. So, broadly, in a market where affordability has gone for a toss for quite some time, a product that is not appreciating, it does not make sense for everyone to buy a house. Of course, we have our own shortcomings in this market because of the absence of proper rental policies in this part of the world. But a house, more often than not, in the wake of any financial uncertainty, any COVID kind of unforeseen circumstances, could be more of a liability than an asset. So, you should buy a house only when you are financially very, very stable. You don't need enough borrowed money to invest in a house. It does not make any sense to buy a house. I know when I advise like this, it does not make me any popular among the builders. But then my job as a real estate journalist and analyst is not to make friends with the builders, not to be in their good books, not to create a cozy club with them. My job is to see what is the best interest of the investors and how best we can advise them in terms of their financial planning when it comes to buying a house.